Hi, I'm Jules Ostara. Welcome to my home here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to make a homemade, handmade card. And I love this project because it's easy and accessible to anyone. You can do it with children if you want. Even if you think you can't draw a stick figure or can barely draw a stick figure, you can still do this. And we all have that creative spark within us. So I was one of those people who thought I couldn't draw or I couldn't draw well enough, wasn't good enough. There's so many other ways to make a mark and to make art. So this is one of those. This is a quick and easy one. And this one is full of love because we're giving our attention and caring if it's making a card that we're giving to someone else. So we get to put that energy into something tangible in this project as well. The one I made was inspired by a blanket that I purchased in Mexico many years ago. I love that the blanket kind of brings that cozy, warm, wrapping someone in our caring, warm, loving attention. And I love the patterns that they use in the blankets. So playing with patterns for the front of the card I like that aspect of the design as well. So I did warm colors going and I wrote warm wishes on mine, all kind of inspired by the blanket. And I love watercolors for the way that they mingle and flow. So that's what I used. If you don't have watercolors, you could substitute by using acrylic paint or markers to get your initial colors on the background. And then I used paint pens to draw the different patterns and designs on it. You can see the supplies in the description below and also see some other more in-depth videos and courses that I offer if you'd like to join me for more after this. I hope you enjoy both the process and your creation. Thanks again for joining me. I'm using 4x6-inch watercolor paper for this. That's the size of a standard postcard for putting in the mail. You could use any size you want and make a folding card if you prefer. Then I'm using various warm colors of watercolor paint straight from the tube right onto the paper so that I'm not wasting any of the paint. Then using a spray bottle to help it start to flow. And I usually have several projects going on at a time since there's drying time in between. You can see the specific brush that I used, again in the supplies below the video, and also get a free downloadable PDF with links to several of my favorite supplies via email if you'd like. I find watching the watercolors start to flow so soothing. For me, the water element is calming. So even just doing this part, taking a few moments out of your day, this did not take me long to do, to enjoy color and flow and the beauty and appreciate that, the energy that we put into that, for me, I've noticed makes a difference in my well-being. And you could also focus on saying a prayer or well wishes for the recipient of the card if you'd like while you're painting and creating it. So that's another lovely way you can infuse it with that energy and intention. So in this one you can see that I mostly kept the colors separated, but that they kind of get to overlap and kiss and touch just a little bit. Now I'm coming in, tipping it to see if it wants to flow a little on its own, to let the colors mingle a little more, and if needed you can come in with a spray bottle with a little bit of water and help it flow a bit as well. Letting the paint mingle and combine in interesting ways. I find that quite beautiful. So I let it fully dry before coming in now with this layer with a very different color, a cool color, this Key West I think it's called. You can see it's quite a striking contrast to the color underneath. So for this first one I was using obviously a paintbrush to make the design marks. You can see at the top there I was referencing something from my sketchbook. I keep a sketchbook in my car and take one with me on the go. Those marks were made while I was sitting in a parking lot waiting for someone, and I really liked the result. The sketchbook gives you a great place for freedom and just to doodle and with no expectations or pressure. And then you can use marks that become favorites in something like this to reference and come back when you are looking for some way to create a pattern or shape or design. I didn't end up loving it, so I decided to make another one. However, I can reuse and repurpose that one, so I'm saving a piece, and now I see how much I prefer just having that Key West color, the cool color, in one small area to give it a pop of color, which is something that I often do on others, but I thought I would push it with that first one and see, play with it. It's always good to try different things, and it was too much for me in the end. I didn't care for it the way it came out, so no worries, we can reuse it. And so this one I made the background the same way with the watercolor, warm colors of watercolor paint as I did for the other one. Again, as I suggest, you might make several at a time while they're drying. Each one will be slightly unique in its own way. The watercolor will, when you let it flow or tilt it to drip, will drip in its own way, mingle in its own way each time. And then coming in with paint pens, which I love using for adding details. And you get this contrast with it of the way that you get this more fine line, sharper line with the paint pens, and you have that more flowy watercolor underneath, and I really enjoy that, the difference between the two together. And this is the one that I really ended up drawing inspiration from memory from the blankets and the kind of design that the blankets had, as opposed to that other design in my sketchbook that I had used for the first one. So this is the one that I really wanted to feature and focus on for this video. However, because I used a little piece of that first one, I wanted to include it, and I also think it's important to know that a lot of times you make several different things to come up with a few favorites, and that's all part of the experimentation and exploration process. So here you can see I'm coming over top of the warm watercolor paint colors with paint marker colors that are also pretty warm. So because I didn't care for that really stark contrast on the first one, I decided to bring in stay mostly monochromatic within the warmer colors, and all that ended up contributing to the energy that warm wishes, which I didn't decide to add until the very end. So whereas I'm sharing this with you after the fact, the creative process is what led me there. So going back and forth, trying things that kind of where we're taking the lead, and then listening and learning along the way, learning what our own preferences are and what we enjoy. So then we can make those changes as we move on to the next piece. Noticing what we'd like to change, and also focusing on what we love the most and bringing that forward as a common thread. This is how we continue to strengthen and develop our voices and our styles and evolve them. So there's plenty of room to grow and change as well. So you can see here I'm adding very easy shapes, so there's no pressure of drawing some like elaborate portrait or particular symbol. It's just diamonds and circles, squares or diamonds, circles, waves, triangles, lines, and they don't have to be straight lines. Wavy lines, dashes, and then these painted dots that I'm placing there as a placeholder, so that I can continue with the pattern using the paint pens and markers, and then I will come back and adhere it in that spot. And all of these ways of adding pattern repetitive marks I had been experimenting with and exploring in my more in-depth session for A Year in Color, which you can learn more about that in the description for the video as well, if you'd like to explore that further in many more ways with other supplies and papers. And this I was doing at the same time that I was preparing that, and decided to just include this as kind of a bonus and a freebie for anyone who wanted to enjoy this one, since it was such a simple and easy project. And I have a tendency to dive deep into a theme and create so much that I can't fit it all into a single session. So this is the overflow, the abundance that I get to share this way. And I thought this particular one made a great standalone project that could be done with children as a homeschool or after school art project, or for any of us who still love to play with art supplies. So now it's time to adhere that other piece. I'm using a matte gel, as you could see, to adhere it. You could use any clear drying adhesive, gel medium or Mod Podge. I chose gel medium because this is a bit heavier weight paper since it's on watercolor paper. And you can see I'm placing it on the back of that piece rather than on the painted card, because I don't want to reactivate the watercolor paint, and I also don't want it to go beyond the edges. It might change the amount of shine, even though this is a matte one. Then lining it up and using a decent amount of pressure to help it stick. And also I didn't put too much on it so that it wouldn't be oozing out the edges. So just enough, but definitely enough. And then you could weigh it down with some bottles like this to help it stick while it's drying, or I had these clips, so I chose to use these clips to help it hold it in place and continue giving it a little bit of pressure while it was drying, specifically because it's such a thick paper. If it had been thinner collage paper, then it wouldn't have been necessary to do this step. So then I set that down and let it dry. Enjoyed it, first admired it makes me happy, and that's a good thing. Then setting it down to let it dry, and I just wanted to show you this washi tape could have been a different option in place of the painted paper. So if you just wanted to make one piece and you didn't have the initial one like I did that you didn't care for, you could add some washi tape for that design or some ribbon. At some point while it was drying, it whispered to me it wanted the warm wishes, so I just wrote it in between working on other projects. I hope you have fun with this. If you'd like to continue to explore playful patterns and all kinds of other creative projects with several other artists from all around the world, we'd love to have you join us for a year in color. Even if you missed the sampler session, it's still available to join us at any time and go at your own pace. You can find the links for that below the video. I hope to see you there. Thanks again for joining me.